What we have here is the Kayadillac Adventurer, a one-off custom prototype. I want to start by saying I have no official affiliation with any of the companies or products that are used in this. It's just a personal project. With that being said, it is a little bit rough around the edges, especially with the silicone, which was done pretty quickly to get it out on the water and test the final results to see if it would actually float. So, what we have here is the transom mount made completely out of materials from Lowe's. It's got stainless steel hardware with an aluminum structure and aluminum rivets attaching it to the body, giving it an overall pretty good rigidity with a little bit of flex on the fiberglass hull there. And additionally, I have some tow hooks, which make it really easy for hooking up the lanyards for pulling the other kayak or the floating dock. Right, so for the battery system, we've got a pretty typical battery box about the standard size, and it's held in by both the strap and these aluminum brackets that are fastened to the fiberglass hull itself. So that gives it the ability to not slide anywhere while in motion, while additionally keeping it on board if the craft were to roll over, especially with its highly sensitive roll nature with all of these changes. So this is a 12 VDC based system mostly, and it starts here with our battery input. The 12 volt bus uses all quick connect cables. These are waterproof, so they can be entirely submerged, but they are incredibly quick and easy to hook up. And one of the greatest features of setting these up this way is that if I have a major system failure on board, I can completely bypass all of the internal electronics and hook straight up to the motor in order to get me back or get me to dry land to deal with the problem. Underneath of the hull, I do have 12 volt bus bars for both the positive and negative rails, and from there I distribute out to the fuse panel and other such components. Also, immediately in line following the battery before the bus bars, I have an 80 amp full system breaker, which is also used to act as the main cut, activating the rest of the features once powered on. Okay. So as far as how I got wiring and other such electronics inside of this otherwise sealed hole, I ended up having to cut 3 different portholes. Thankfully, I did find a product that is meant to be waterproof so long as you get the rest of the silicone correct. Again, forgive the messiness here, but the main thing was to keep it afloat to make sure the overall concept works. That being said, the other 2 access ports are much larger, but as much as I could facilitate here. If you look inside here, you'll see some of the wiring leading over to the 12 volt bus bars, as well as the bilge hole. Looking on at the middle port under the seat, this provides access to the bilge system, primarily the pump and the sensor. Each one of these have a fitted rubber gasket to provide a good seal there. And finally, the one where I keep most of the sensitive electronics, highest point, in case water floods in. This is where the flashers, the relays, and other such logic for the circuitry is kept, as well as additional documents for registration, schematics. As far as the electrical system, after the 12 volt bus, it really starts here with the fuse panel, which itself is somewhat waterproof. Still working on finalizing that, but for the most part, works out well. Every feature on the system here has an independently fused circuit. And of course, every fuse circuit has an LED indicator light if you blow a fuse, making it easy to spot and identify which one to replace. It also has some additional slots for storing backup fuses should one blow while out on the water. First feature we have is a fully prepared and ready electric tilt circuit for the electric trolling motor. There is no actuator on board yet. I'm still working on the mechanical design of that solution, but as soon as I have it, the circuit is ready to go and I'll be able to bring the motor up and down in the water to avoid shallow spots that will drag the propeller. So another feature we have here is the bilge monitoring, alarm, and pump system. So like many watercraft, you have an automatic mode, which is triggered by the solid state water sensor that's in the middle of the hole below the seat, and you have a manual mode. Wouldn't want to run that too long. Obviously, don't run a dry pump, that will burn it up. There is a blue indicator to indicate when the pump itself is receiving power and thus should be running. As far as the actual components of the system, they are kept in here with a Seaflow 1100 gallon per hour pump and a Seaflow solid state water sensor. I have it turned on its side to achieve the lowest depth of trigger possible. Works great that way. So far so great, I do recommend it. And of course that bilge pump dumps out back here out of this blue nozzle via an 1¼ hose that runs back from the center. So next feature is the horn for audible distress alert, signaling, whatever else you need. It's a pretty simple one, 133 dB, nothing special here, but it is decently loud for the water. So next we have the powertrain circuit and overall system, starting with your typical dead man switch. This particular one has to be replaced. Unfortunately, it's more of an alarm switch as it turns out. Quite the opposite of how it needs to work. But with that being said, you activate your powertrain circuit here. And one thing to note about all of these switches in general is that since they're independently fused, every one has an indication of whether that circuit is ready to even provide power. The green light here indicates whether power is actually reaching the motor following the relay, 60 amp relay, that switches the motor's power off of the 12 volt bus. Additionally, it includes a 60 amp breaker, which cuts off the motor as well, should you need to, from the rider's seat. And then with that being said, we have the actual motor itself. 12 volt system with a 55 pound rated thrust, fully wireless control for steering and power. Different speeds, instant stop, and the steering is very, very accurate. It's rather quick too. For our accessory circuit, we have some pretty standard features, 12 volt accessory port / cigarette lighter, whatever you need there, up to 20 amps. Over here we have your USB charging for USB 3 and PD standards. And then here, of course, we have a digital voltage monitor, which allows me to keep a fairly decent gauge of how much capacity is left in the battery itself, which is a lithium 100 amp hour. So the next feature is the bilge lights. This is good for checking for water leaks or dealing with any electrical problems, things of that nature. I have them installed throughout, allowing for a very clear view all through the hole. This includes the area where the actual bilge pump system is, as well as the area where the 12 volt system bus and other such connections are maintained. So next up we have the navigation lights. There's a primary and a secondary depending on what's necessary and appropriate. The primary is a pretty typical one that you've seen on most boats, with the exception that this one is on a riser pole using a standard light port, as is custom for marine applications. But then, should you need higher visibility, especially since you'll be sitting so low to the water, we have the secondary navigation lights, which are likely visible up to at least a mile on typical conditions. Next up, we have the stern light, a pretty typical application here. Same as the forward navigation light, standard port. You can bring any typical stern light you want. This one's a simple telescopic one, which is nice for getting different heights, depending on how you're using the kayak. So here we have the interior lighting circuit. This can be convenient for all sorts of things, obviously. So we have two in the forward. We have two right at your controls/leg area. We have two forward of the battery on your breaker area back here, and then the final two in the rear near your fuse panel area and additional storage. Coming back up here, another feature that I've done, being that these can be very bright at night, is I've added a dimmer circuit so you can get them pretty well anywhere you need them to be. So here we have the exterior lighting. This can be great for docking, checking the waters, getting close to shores, or attracting fish if you're into fishing or any of that. One of my most favorite features, this is more so for the enjoyment and leisure while out on the lake or what have you, a little egregious, but quite fun, is the accent LED circuits, which do have a reasonably smart controller allowing for all sorts of really cool functions, including reactions to music, among, of course, nice solid color accenting, which tends to look real slick in different environments. Lastly, we have our audible alert system and our distress mode. In general, I have a audible alarm buzzer up here that is used for alerting on bilge water alarms, as well as the distress mode. All of that is triggered and controlled here. Every alarm has an override to prevent the audible alarm, including an override for the horn itself, which is automatically triggered during the distress mode. Here's what that distress mode looks like and sounds like. And this, of course, overrides any other activated circuit so that it always functions just as you see it here.